Jack forgot to mute the background sound in his WeChat live photo. A sweet, playful girl's voice came through from the image. You ruined my lingerie again. Can you stay with me for one more day? I don't want you to go back to that old hag. A friend kindly reminded him, wasn't he afraid that I would hear it and make a scene? Jack scoffed. Does she have any other tricks up her sleeve? Indeed, in the past, I would have cried, argued, and even threatened to leave. But this time, I simply gave the post a like and made no further moves. Chapter 01. Jack called me. My flight is delayed. Don't wait for me to have dinner. His voice over the phone was calm and indifferent, carrying a hint of cold detachment, even in his explanation. In the past, if I heard something like this, I would have said, "It's okay. When will you be home? I'll wait for you." Then I'd chatter away about all sorts of nonsense, helping him kill time while he waited for his flight. But now, I simply responded with a faint I didn't even say take care on the way. Because before falling asleep last night, I came across Jack's latest post on Twitter. It was surprising. A man like him, who wouldn't even announce his marriage publicly, actually decided to update his timeline one day. Curious. I eagerly tapped on the post, intending to give it a like after reading. Then I heard the voice in the live image. Jack had forgotten to mute the background audio. The playful, sweet voice of a young woman stood out clearly. Are you reporting back to that old hag again? Ugh, you ruined my lingerie again. Can you stay with me for one more day? I don't want you to go back to that old hag. At first, I thought it was just some random affectionate couple, until I reached the last image. A low, indulgent chuckle from Jack played through. I'll buy you a new one. Ever since I met Jack, he had always been like an untouchable flower on a high mountain, cold, reserved, and restrained. I had always believed that a man like him could never say such blatantly flirtatious words. After all, back then, I used to whisper all kinds of sweet nothings to him. Yet every time, he would only frown and cut me off with, "Emily, can you be a little more reserved?" Chapter 02. Jack seemed a little surprised that I had only responded with a single word. He wanted to say something more, but I had already hung up. With the words left unspoken, Jack had no choice but to send me a message instead. I'll bring you a gift when I get back. What do you want? It was a gesture of goodwill, but also a test. After he posted that tweet last night, one of his friends had noticed the voice in the background. That friend left a comment. Jack, aren't you afraid your wife will hear this and make a scene again? Jack quickly replied, what else can she do besides that? Even through the screen, I could sense the disdain in his tone. He probably forgot that I had once added this friend on WeChat. I could see all their comments. Indeed, in the past, I would have cried, fought, and thrown a fit, because I really loved Jack so much that my possessiveness bordered on unhealthy. Whenever a young woman appeared around him, I would treat her like an enemy. Jack hated that about me. For 3 years, we tormented each other like this, drifting through our marriage in cold indifference. Even when we got married, I thought, no matter what, I want to be with him for a lifetime. But now, after just 3 years, I was suddenly exhausted. I calmly liked Jack's post and then shut down my phone to sleep. By the time I woke up, his tweet was already deleted, and soon after, I received his call about his delayed flight. I checked the flight schedule. The weather in his city was perfectly fine. There were no delays. The only thing that could have made him use such an excuse was the girl from the background audio. Jack arrived home at midnight. Seeing me lying on the sofa, his usually expressionless face flickered with surprise. Didn't you say you wouldn't wait up? I wasn't waiting for him. I had simply dozed off while reminiscing about our past. Jack handed me a gift bag. I brought you something. I was a little surprised. I had assumed his earlier message was just empty words. He told me to open it. Inside was a small figurine, adorable, but not the kind of gift he would usually pick. Immediately, that playful girl's voice echoed in my mind. Jack watched me closely, as if expecting some kind of reaction, but I simply put the gift back in the box. Thank you. Not seeing the expression he had anticipated on my face, Jack frowned. You have nothing to say to me? Keep your noise down when you wash up later. I need to rest. Jack's frown deepened. Looking back now, what was he hoping I'd say? Did he want me to ask about that tweet? Or about the girl he took on his business trip? But none of that mattered anymore. Even Jack no longer mattered. The next day, Jack went to work. At noon, I suddenly received a call from him. Emily, didn't you bring me lunch? Chapter 03. Oh, right. Ever since marrying Jack, I had been making him lunch every day. Jack might not love me, but he was undeniably fond of my cooking. I've been busy these past few days. I don't have time. Just order takeout. The other end of the call fell into sudden silence. And just like that, 2 or 3 days passed. Then, I received a call from the Lee family's old residence. Tomorrow was the Lee family banquet, and both Jack and I were expected to attend. I sent Jack a message, but he didn't reply. So, I went to his office, only to be told that he was still in a meeting. It's fine, I'll wait for him in his office. Jack's secretary watched me head toward his office, then reached out to stop me. Something else? Before she could answer, I had already pushed open the office door. A gray and white blur suddenly darted out of the room. Ah! I gasped in surprise. Then, realizing it was just a British short-hair cat, I froze in place. The secretary quickly scooped up the cat and offered me an apologetic explanation. Sorry, Mrs. Lee, I forgot to mention, the chairman got a cat. There was no way this cat belongs to Jack. He was a clean freak. He hadn't even let me get a puppy at home. Why would he suddenly allow a cat in his office? And not just that, let it roam freely inside? Around its neck hung a peach-colored heart-shaped scarf. No matter how I looked at it, the cat's owner was clearly a woman. As if to confirm my suspicion, a bright and cheerful female voice suddenly rang out behind me. I brought shrimp and corn stir-fry and some curry chicken today. Try some later. All right. Oh no! Bowsy, how did you get out? Their conversation hit me like a thunderclap. I turned around and saw a man and a woman walking side by side. A chill crept up from the soles of my feet. The man was Jack. As for the woman, I could never mistake that voice. It was the same voice from Jack's tweet a few days ago. They were chatting and laughing. Because of their height difference, Jack was leaning slightly toward her, listening intently. There was a softness in his eyes, a gentle warmth lingering at the corners of his lips. Then, as soon as the woman spotted the British short hair in the secretary's arms, her eyes lit up. She quickly stepped forward and cradled the cat in her embrace. Jack's gaze followed her movements. That warmth in his eyes, that indulgent affection, he wasn't even trying to hide it. But then, his eyes lifted slightly, looking past the secretary and the woman, and landed on me, standing at the office door. In that instant, his smile disappeared. Chapter 04. The girl remained oblivious. She played with the British short hair, Bowsy, in her arms and turned to Jack with a bright smile. Jack, look. Then, she noticed the sudden shift in his expression. As if sensing something, she followed his gaze and turned to look at me as well. This time, I got a clear look at her face. She was exactly as I had imagined. Young, playful, beautiful. Her lively eyes sparkled like clear gems. At that moment, I understood why Jack treated her differently. Because she looked just like Jack's late first love. Back in college, Jack had dated a girl. She was gentle, well-educated, and charming. They were known as the golden couple of the finance department. When they broke up, many people sighed in regret. Then, on the day before Jack and I got married, she was on her way to attend the wedding banquet when she got into a fatal car accident. Our marriage had been a disaster from the start, and that was one of the reasons why. I thought Jack had long since moved on. I never expected. The girl holding the cat looked puzzled at first, then quickly shifted into an assessing gaze. Lillian. Who is this? She called the secretary's name directly. Lillian looked like she wanted to crawl into a hole. She glanced at the girl, then at Jack, then, reluctantly answered. This is Chairman Lee's wife. Wife. The girl repeated the word, her tone light. She cradled the cat, the corners of her lips curling ever so slightly. Her youthful face carried the unmistakable arrogance of someone basking in favoritism. Clearly, she already knew who I was. Her question was intentional. Jack finally snapped out of his daze. He quickly strode over to me, a trace of panic in his expression. "What are you doing here?" He deliberately positioned himself in front of me, blocking my view of her. "How protective." "I need to talk to you." Jack gestured for me to step into his office. Honestly, it was just a one-sentence matter, but he seemed worried that I would confront his little lover in front of everyone, so he preemptively pushed open the office door. In the corner near his desk was a makeshift cat bed. Scattered on the desk were a few cat toys. I could almost picture the scene, Jack and that girl, playing with the cat together in this very room. Noticing my gaze, Jack quickly explained, "The cat belongs to one of the employees. I'm just taking care of it temporarily." Ridiculous. Who would dare let their boss babysit their pet? I didn't call him out on his lie. Jack was eager to change the subject anyway. "What did you need to talk about?" Just as I was about to speak, the office door was knocked on again. "Jack!" Bowsy threw up. "What do I do?" Naomi burst into the room, voice thick with worry, on the verge of tears. Jack's attention instantly shifted. "What happened?" "I don't know. It just happened suddenly." Jack immediately took the cat from Naomi's arms. I watched as he gently comforted the British short-hair. A few strands of cat fur clung to his sleeve and collar, but he didn't seem to notice. "Let's take it to the vet." He made the decision without hesitation, as if the cat in his arms were his own beloved child. And suddenly, I remembered. There was a time when I had a fever. Feeling weak and miserable, I had asked Jack to drive me to the hospital, but he dismissed me coldly. "Just take a taxi." So not only was I worth less than that girl, I wasn't even worth more than a cat. I had been sitting for barely 3 minutes when Jack was already preparing to leave. This time, I finally couldn't hold it in. Jack. Chapter 05. It was only then that the two of them seemed to realize I was still there. Jack opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, Naomi turned to me, her eyes brimming with tears. "Emily, I know you have something to discuss with Chairman Lee, but Bowsy is seriously ill. If we don't take him to the vet, he could die." Huh? I wasn't stopping them from seeing a vet, and couldn't just one person go? "You've never had a pet before, so you wouldn't understand. Bowsy is like my child. Please, I'm begging you, let us take him to the vet first." I hadn't even said a word, and yet Naomi was already making me the villain. Jack, whether out of concern for her or the cat, now looked at me with disapproval as well. His gaze carried the kind of silent reproach that made it seem like I was the unreasonable one here, like I was deliberately delaying their precious vet visit. "Emily, whatever you need to say, just wait until I get back." "No need. It's just one sentence." I stood up, meeting Jack's frown with a calm gaze. "Tomorrow is the family banquet. Grandma wants us to go home for dinner." That was all. They could leave now. Surprisingly, Jack remained frozen in place. His expression was strange as he stared at me. "That's it? What else did he expect?" I kindly reminded him, "You should hurry. Don't delay the cat's treatment." Jack still seemed dazed, as if he couldn't process my reaction. He hesitated, opening his mouth as if to say something. But in the end, it was Naomi who urged him along. That night, Jack didn't come home. At midnight, my phone lit up with a friend request. The profile picture was an anime cat emoji. I immediately knew who it was from. After accepting the request, I received a photo of Jack petting the cat. "Sorry, the kitty is too clingy." Aw, youth. Even provocation carried an air of smugness. I ignored her message and instead sent a simple reply. "Don't forget to remind Jack about tomorrow's family banquet." She didn't respond after that. I had assumed that I wouldn't see Jack until I arrived at the Lee family's estate the next day. But before I even set out, I saw his car parked outside. "I came to pick you up." A free ride? Might as well take it. The front passenger seat was clean and spacious. It seemed like Jack had his car washed before coming to get me. I leaned back and closed my eyes to rest. Throughout the drive, I could feel his gaze flickering toward me now and then. In the past, whenever I rode in his car, I would chatter nonstop. Now that I was silent, even the air in the car felt quieter. Jack gripped the steering wheel tightly and finally spoke. "Emily, Bowsy's condition was serious last night. I stayed at the hospital to watch over him. That's why I didn't come home." He was explaining his absence. How rare. He never used to explain himself before. If I ever asked too many questions, he'd get annoyed. Now that I didn't ask, he was explaining on his own. I know, someone already told me. Who told you? His voice sounded a little tense. The cat's owner. I answered honestly. Jack gave me a careful glance. You mean Naomi? She's my new secretary intern. She found the cat near the company building and couldn't take it home. So she. I got it. I wasn't interested in hearing his explanation. I cut him off. Jack fell silent. When he turned to look at me again, his expression wavered slightly. Emily, why aren't you angry anymore? Chapter 06. As we stepped out of the car, Jack reached for my hand. Instinctively, I tried to pull away, but he held on tightly. Grandma. At the sound of his voice, I finally noticed the elderly woman waiting at the ornate iron gates. It was Jack's grandmother. Come to think of it, she was the reason Jack and I got married in the first place. I had always been good at sweet talking, often making her laugh with delight. She adored me, holding my hand and saying that if I married her grandson, she'd be happy every day. Back then, Jack and I were struggling to stay together after the death of his first love. It was Grandma's kindness and mediation that kept us going. She treated me well, better than anyone else in the Lee family. But now, she had Alzheimer's. I didn't want her to notice the rift between Jack and me and worry about it. So, I tolerated Jack's touch and put on a smile. Grandma. Seeing us approach hand in hand, Grandma beamed with joy. Jack, noticing I didn't resist, seemed to relax, a hint of a smile appearing on his lips as well. Apart from Grandma, there was also Jack's mother, but my relationship with her was indifferent at best. During dinner, she spoke briefly about Grandma's health before turning the conversation toward us. You two have been married for quite some time now. When are you planning to have children? Jack and I sat on the same side of the table. At her words, I caught a glimpse of his startled expression. This was an unavoidable question at every family gathering. But in the past, Jack would either brush it off or give a vague response. This time, however, as he carefully picked bones out of his fish, he actually answered. We're already preparing for it. His mother and grandmother both lit up with surprise and delight. I, on the other hand, frowned and turned to look at him. Jack ignored my gaze and placed the deboned fish into my dish. I felt utterly exasperated. What was he playing at? I pushed the fish aside and spoke coolly. We'll see. I don't want kids right now. The dining room fell into silence. Jack's mother's expression stiffened, while Grandma blinked in confusion. Back home, Jack pulled me aside, gripping my wrist. His tone was tense, barely restrained. Why would you say that in front of them? I could feel his anger simmering. I countered calmly. Did I say anything wrong? Hadn't he always given similar responses before? Maybe it was the sarcasm in my gaze, but Jack's grip faltered slightly. He stared at me, as if trying to read my thoughts. Emily, you did that on purpose, didn't you? You're angry. His tone softened, carrying a hint of helplessness. Is this about that tweet? If it is, I can explain. Since he brought it up again, I met his gaze directly. What exactly do you want to explain? Jack fell silent. What was he going to say? That it was a dare? A joke? Who would believe that? I decided to be generous. You don't need to explain to me. I paused, then added indifferently. But Grandma isn't in great health. You should be careful to keep your affairs hidden. Jack had always had other women around him, but they never stayed long. Before, it was too fleeting to confront. But this time, he had posted about it publicly, even though he deleted it quickly. Who knew if someone had already passed word to Grandma? Jack's eyes flickered with shock at my words. He studied my expression carefully. Then suddenly, as if realizing something, he let out a cold laugh. You've improved your tactics, Emily. Now it was my turn to be confused. Before I could respond, Jack's assistant called. Jack. Her voice, Naomi's voice, was especially soft and sweet, cutting through the tense silence between us. I didn't catch all of it, just a fragment. Can you come keep me company? Jack's expression darkened slightly. For a brief moment, his gaze swept over me. I'll be right there. At his words, Naomi's voice instantly brightened with excitement. Jack cast me one last deep glance before turning away and leaving. Chapter 07. That night, Jack didn't come home. He had plenty of places to stay. And unlike before, I no longer cared. The ironic thing was, I didn't go looking for Jack, but his little assistant came looking for me. Emily, I'm here to pick up some clothes for Chairman Lee. The next morning, Naomi stood at my doorstep, wearing a deliberately polite smile. Is he going on a business trip? I asked. If Jack were traveling for work, his secretary would have informed me in advance and come to retrieve his luggage. This was the first time someone had shown up unannounced like this. Naomi made herself at home, stepping into the master bedroom I shared with Jack. Skillfully, she selected and folded his everyday clothes. Hearing my question, she turned her head to look at me, her pretty eyes gleaming with blatant provocation. No, not a business trip. Not a business trip. Then that meant he had moved elsewhere. I understood immediately. Naomi curled her lips in satisfaction. Emily, if there's anything he forgets, I'll have to trouble you to send it over. I chuckled, then turned and walked into Jack's study. A moment later, I returned with a framed photo and placed it neatly atop the pile of clothes she had packed. Don't forget this. Naomi's gaze fell on the photo. It was a picture of Jack with another woman. Not me, and not her. Jack cherishes it a lot. Make sure you don't break it. Naomi's expression stiffened. Her voice turned colder. Who is she? I smiled. Jack's first love. Come to think of it, you do look quite like her. Though, compared to the previous ones, you still fall a little short. Naomi, who had been so smug just moments ago, suddenly froze. Her expression twisted between embarrassment and anger before she stormed out. Later, I figured she must have reflected on how poorly she handled that encounter. Because not long after, I received a message from her. I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to drive a wedge between me and Jack. But I won't fall for it. I shrugged. Indifferent. But to Naomi, my lack of reaction probably seemed more like outright dismissal or even a declaration of war. She couldn't hold it in any longer. Over the next few days, she posted several pictures of herself with Jack on Twitter. Her captions were always poetic, always sentimental. So happy to be your safe harbor. I knew she was trying to provoke me. So when she posted yet another picture, I couldn't resist reminding her. You do realize that everything you're sending me is just proof of you being the other woman in Jack's affair, right? Silence. A few minutes later, she deleted all the photos. I laughed. Everyone else was mocking her, but she was the one laughing the loudest. Chapter 08. Naomi had finally quieted down. I hadn't expected to run into her again just a few days later, but this time, it was purely by chance. An old friend of mine, Professor Joel, invited me out for a meal. While catching up, he took me on a brief tour of his university campus. By coincidence, the school was hosting an arts festival. Naomi stood at the entrance under a welcoming banner, helping with the event sign-in. The moment she saw me, a mix of emotions flashed across her face: shock, discomfort, and finally, reluctant restraint. In the end, bound by the role she was playing, she bowed slightly and said, "Good afternoon. This way, please." After she left, Joel turned to me. "You know her?" I hadn't expected him to be so perceptive. I chuckled lightly. "I've seen her around Jack." I kept my words vague, but Joel still frowned. "You and Jack." I didn't have many close friends, but those who knew me well had all witnessed how much I had once loved Jack. And now, seeing me face everything so calmly, Joel's eyes softened with regret. What was supposed to be a joyful reunion suddenly took on a heavier tone. Seeing his expression, I had to be the one to reassure him instead. "It's fine. Let's not let someone like that ruin our mood." I meant it sincerely. Reuniting with an old friend was far more important than Naomi. Joel looked at me for a moment, as if debating whether to laugh or admire me. "You're still the same as ever." The only unfortunate part was that Joel was suddenly called away to review some urgent coursework, and our dinner plans had to be cancelled. "I'm really sorry. Once I'm done, I'll take you out for a proper meal to make it up to you." "No worries." Just like that, The brief encounter with Naomi faded from my mind. Joel, however, ended up getting so busy that an entire week passed before I heard from him again. When he finally called, his tone was serious. Emily, can you come to Baiha Tower right now? It didn't sound like an invitation for dinner. It sounded urgent. I drove to the location he sent and entered the private dining room. The moment I stepped inside, I froze. Besides Joel, Jack was there, Naomi was there, and several other people as well. Emily. Joel stood up and walked toward me. I asked, "What's going on?" He smiled slightly before turning back to face the others. "Now that both parties are here, why don't we clear things up together? It's not fair to judge based on one side of the story. Is it?" Jack's expression was dark. Naomi's gaze was evasive. And the other people in the room? They looked downright uncomfortable. Finally, through Joel's explanation, I understood what had happened. Joel had attended a friend's birthday gathering. Jack and Naomi had shown up midway through. At first, Joel hadn't paid much attention to them, but then Jack abruptly confronted him. Jack had demanded to know why Joel had rejected Naomi's graduate school application. According to Jack, Naomi was a hardworking and talented student, and he hoped Joel would reconsider. "She applied to study under me," Joel explained. "And then?" Then, Joel had turned her down, leading to Jack's questioning. But even after Jack's intervention, Joel still refused. Under normal circumstances, that should have been the end of it. Except Naomi had suddenly stood up and said, in a voice full of grievance, "Professor Joel, are you rejecting me because of Emily? I saw you two together at the arts festival. I don't know what she told you about me, but it's unfair to ruin a student's academic future over it." The moment Naomi spoke my name, the room had gone completely silent. No one had expected me to get dragged into this. And Jack? Jack's expression had turned sharp as a blade as he stared at Joel. "You and Emily know each other?" Joel had answered simply, "We're friends." Naomi, eyes brimming with unshed tears, leaned into Jack's side, playing the pitiful victim. "So it was Emily who told you to reject me?" Joel blinked. Then, deadpan, he replied, "What kind of bullshit is that?" Chapter 09. Because of Naomi's one-sided accusations and Jack's blind readiness to condemn me, Joel had finally had enough. That's why he called me here, to settle this face-to-face. And now that I had heard the full story, I was just as speechless as Joel. Joel turned to Naomi again, his voice calm but firm. "Miss, the reason I rejected your application has nothing to do with Emily. Don't act like a pretentious coquette and slander others so easily." Naomi's expression stiffened, but she still refused to back down. "Why? My grades are excellent. I have a perfect GPA. What gives you the right to reject me?" Joel's polite smile disappeared, replaced by an icy seriousness. "Because in my program, I do not accept students with poor character." The moment those words left his lips, Naomi's face went deathly pale. The others in the room looked as if they wished they could sink into the ground and disappear. Joel's words were blunt and final. After delivering his warning, his usual warm demeanor returned as he turned to me. "Come on, let's go get that meal I promised you." I nodded, casting a brief glance at Jack and Naomi before getting ready to leave with Joel. Just as I turned, Naomi's shrill voice rang out behind me, her anger barely contained. "You say I have bad character, but what about you? Emily is a married woman, and yet you're acting all close and suspicious with her." The room instantly fell silent. Joel frowned, turning back. Naomi glared at him with burning resentment. "What? Did I hit a nerve? You, ah." A sharp crash echoed through the room. A wine glass had shattered against the floor, its broken pieces glinting under the light. Naomi had instinctively dodged, now staring wide-eyed at the shards. But it wasn't the broken glass she was afraid of. It was me. The coldness in my gaze made her tremble as she shrank back. Pressing herself closer to Jack, I stepped toward her. 1 step. She flinched. 2 steps. She clutched Jack's sleeve in panic. Just as I was about to close the distance completely, Jack stepped in front of me, frowning. "Emily, that's enough," he scolded me, his tone full of disapproval. How ridiculous. When Naomi slandered me, he stayed silent. But the moment I so much as intimidated her, he couldn't wait to step in and protect her. I met Jack's gaze, cold and unwavering. He sighed, as if trying to reason with me. I know you're still angry with me. Let's just call this even. Even? I let out a laugh, low, cold, full of mockery. Jack, just because your mind is filthy and your actions are disgraceful, don't assume I'm the same. You make me sick. Jack's face turned pale. Then, without another word, I grabbed Naomi by the wrist, and with 2 crisp slaps, I struck her across both cheeks. Naomi was too stunned to even cry out. By the time she registered what had happened, my hand had already dropped back to my side. The first slap is for seducing my husband. The second is for slandering my friend. Naomi clutched her face, staring at me with a mix of shock and fury. The thing you're fighting so hard for? It's not something I even care about anymore. If you want it, take it. No need to thank me. I smiled, a sharp, mocking curve of my lips. Jack grabbed my wrist in a panic, his grip tight. Emily, what do you mean by that? I looked him straight in the eye, my voice calm but resolute. Don't you understand? I don't want you anymore. We're getting a divorce. Each word was clear and unwavering. And this time, I meant it. Chapter 10. After leaving, Joel offered to drive me home. As he watched my cold, unreadable expression, he hesitated before speaking. Emily, people tend to say things in the heat of the moment. You mean about the divorce? Joel didn't deny it. I chuckled lightly. I'm not acting on impulse. And you don't need to feel guilty. This has nothing to do with you. Love is like a glass of water with a crack in it. It leaks a little each day, until one day, it's completely gone. Jack had never noticed the cracks, never tried to fix them, and just like that, my feelings for him had disappeared. Little by little, Joel didn't try to talk me out of it again. He simply said, "Good luck." When I got home, I pulled out the suitcase I had packed in advance. Jack's absence over the past few days had given me the perfect time to get rid of old belongings. Just then, my phone rang. It was Jack's mother. Her first words? "What childish tantrum are you throwing now?" So, she had somehow caught wind of the trouble between Jack and me. "I knew something was off when you two came back last time. Emily, even if you're upset, you need to know when to stop. Who would tolerate you acting like this?" My relationship with Jack's mother had always been lukewarm at best, largely because Jack himself had never truly liked me. But there was nothing she could do about it. Jack had married me because his grandmother had insisted on it. I could hear the mockery in her voice. And, as expected, she went on to lecture me about how I should treat her son better. "Auntie," I cut her off, unable to hold back anymore. She fell silent for a second. "What did you just call me?" I ignored her question. Instead, I said, "Since you can't stand me, why don't you tell your son to divorce me?" "What?" I hung up before she could react. Jack, however, arrived home 30 minutes later. By then, I had already placed the signed divorce papers on the coffee table. Jack froze when he saw me standing by the door with my suitcase. For the first time in a long while, panic flickered in his eyes. He strode forward quickly and blocked my way. "Emily, stop messing around." His voice was low, carrying a quiet warning. His normally refined brows were furrowed in displeasure. "I'm not messing around." I gestured toward the table. "Here, I've already signed the divorce papers. Since he was back, he might as well sign them too." Jack finally noticed the documents. His face changed slightly. "You're serious?" He looked at me, as if he couldn't quite believe it. "Just because of Naomi? If you don't like her, I can get rid of her. I won't have anything to do with her from now on," he promised. Even now, he still didn't understand. Naomi was never the real issue between us. I didn't bother arguing with him. I simply pushed his hand away, opened the door, and stepped out. "Make sure you sign it." Chapter 11. Of course, Jack didn't sign the divorce papers. News of our impending divorce spread quickly. Jack's friends came to talk me out of it, but I ignored them all. Meanwhile, Jack was trying everything he could to fix things. After leaving home that day, I stayed with a friend and took up a quiet job at his studio to transition. By the third day, the studio started receiving flowers and lunch deliveries. No sender's name, just a note saying they were for me. Who's sending these? My friend asked, noticing my expression. Then, as if realizing something, he scoffed. Don't tell me. Jack? I didn't confirm or deny. It wasn't hard for Jack to find out my address. My friend let out a cold laugh. If he regretted it this much, why didn't he think about it earlier? I had once thrown myself into loving Jack without hesitation. And yet, my friends had seen the imbalance in our relationship far before I ever did. I tossed all the flowers into the trash. As for the food, there were a few stray animals in the garden downstairs. Not wanting to waste anything, I fed them. That was when I ran into Naomi. Emily, are you satisfied now? She glared at me, as if I had committed some heinous crime against her. Through her bitter words, I pieced together what had happened. Jack had fired her. Not only that, but he had his office thoroughly cleaned. The cat toys were gone. In their place, our framed wedding photo sat on his desk. And because Joel had rejected Naomi's graduate school application, people started speculating. The more they speculated, the more they dug. And soon enough, someone exposed Naomi as the other woman. Now, she had not only lost her job but was also being ostracized at school. And she had come to blame me for it all. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have ended up like this. Her accusations drew the attention of passing pedestrians. I found it laughable, pathetic. Even, you brought this upon yourself. That's a lie. You were already Mrs. Lee. What more could you possibly want? Why did you have to ruin me? She refused to listen. I wasn't in the mood to argue. Instead, I pulled out my phone and called Jack. Come pick up your little mistress. 20 minutes later, Jack arrived. He hurriedly stepped out of his car, walking straight past Naomi to me. Emmy, take her away. It was only then that Jack seemed to notice Naomi's presence. He frowned. I never told her to come find you. I didn't care to hear his explanation. I turned to leave. Behind me, I could hear Jack scolding Naomi, her voice breaking into sobs. Liar! You told me you liked me. Jack looked at her, expression indifferent. Even if I did, no one could ever compare to her. Naomi froze in place, stunned. Jack warned her to stay away from me, then had someone escort her away. Naomi was gone, but Jack remained standing downstairs. Unfortunately for him, my friend upstairs caught sight of it. Annoyed, he leaned out the window and dumped a bucket of water over Jack's head. Bad luck. Chapter 12. I had thought that after everything, Jack would finally give up and sign the divorce papers. But a few days later, I received a call from Grandmolly. Emily, dear, it's been so long since you've visited me. When are you coming home? I could ignore Jack. I could ignore his mother. But I couldn't ignore Grandmolly. So I returned to the Lee family estate. I hadn't expected Jack to be there. He was pushing Grandma's wheelchair, his expression soft, his face alight with a smile as he looked at me. Emily, you're here? Grandma. She reached out and took my hand, delighted, talking endlessly about all sorts of things. I listened patiently. Jack sat nearby. Then, out of nowhere, Grandma suddenly said, Emily, you don't have a boyfriend yet, do you? Look at my grandson, handsome, isn't he? Jack and I froze at the same time. We immediately realized her condition was acting up again. Do you like him? If you do, I can introduce you to Grandma. Jack interrupted gently, smiling as he explained. Emily and I are already married. She's your granddaughter-in-law. Oh, really? Grandma turned to me, looking for confirmation. Jack also looked at me, eyes full of quiet hope. I hesitated. Then, in the end, I nodded. Ha ha ha. Good, good. Granddaughter-in-law. Granddaughter-in-law. Grandma beamed. Then, turning to Jack, she scolded. Jack, you must treat her well. Do you understand? After her stern warning, she turned back to me. Emily, if this brat ever bullies you, just tell Grandma. I'll beat him up for you. She took my hand and placed it in Jack's. I instinctively tried to pull away, but Jack held on tightly. I had planned to find the right moment to tell Grandma the truth about Jack and me, but she remained disoriented all day and went to bed early that night. Jack, perhaps sensing my intentions, found me afterward. I already knew what he wanted to talk about. Sure enough, he asked if we could hold off on the divorce. The doctor said Grandma's health isn't good. She can't handle emotional stress. Emmy, can we just put it on pause for now? His eyes held an unfamiliar pleading look. He looked almost desperate. The weight in my chest made it hard to speak. And so, for the time being, Jack and I resumed a fragile truce. Jack took every opportunity to bring me to the Lee estate to visit Grandma. It almost felt like the life I had once dreamed of. That day, Jack drove me over again, but this time, he suddenly told Grandma, "Grandma, we won't be joining you for dinner next week." "Oh, why not?" Jack smiled. "Next week is our 3rd wedding anniversary." He said he had already made reservations. Hearing him bring up that date, I froze for a moment. Jack was not someone who cared about anniversaries, and given how we had gotten married, he had never liked mentioning it. I still remembered our first anniversary, how I had prepared a surprise, only for him to coldly brush it off. Now, he was the one bringing it up. I frowned slightly, about to speak, but before I could, Jack suddenly reached for my hand. I looked at him in surprise, only to see Grandma already clapping in excitement. "Good, good. You two should go and enjoy yourselves. Don't worry about me." On the way back, I finally said, "Jack, don't forget, we're in the middle of a divorce." Yes, even with Grandma in the picture, I had never changed my mind about leaving him, but I was willing to keep it from her for now. Jack kept his hand steady on the wheel. "I know, Emmy, but I just want to have one proper meal with you. Just this once, please?" His voice carried that same uncharacteristic humility. I fell silent, seeing that I didn't refuse. Jack's mood seemed lighter over the next few days. He was out early, back late. It was obvious he was preparing for that day. But in the end, our anniversary never arrived, because just a few days before it, I saw Naomi again. She was different this time. Gone was the desperation, the erratic anger. Instead, she held her chin high, her gaze carrying a quiet arrogance. "If you're looking for Jack, he's not here," I said flatly. "I'm not looking for him. I'm looking for you." I raised a brow. "Oh." Naomi looked straight at me, and then, with a smirk, she said, "I'm pregnant." Chapter 13. For a moment, I wouldn't say it was a thunderclap to my ears, but Naomi's words still sent a shock through me. I stared at her in disbelief. Her eyes gleamed with pride. With smugness, I blinked, then recovered. "Oh, congratulations." I turned to leave. Naomi, however, stepped in front of me. I said, "I'm pregnant. Did you not hear me?" She grabbed my arm, but I immediately shook her off. "And what does that have to do with me? The child is Jack's. Then go find him. I'm not the father." I couldn't hold back my irritation. Naomi suddenly fell to her knees. "He won't let me keep the baby. I had no choice but to come to you." I stared at her. She came to me? For what? I felt a mix of frustration and absurd amusement. Naomi clutched my arm, pleading, "Emily, I know I've wronged you, but my child can't grow up without a father. I'm begging you, please talk to Jack. Let me keep this baby, okay?" She sobbed as she clung to me, shaking my arm desperately. The constant tugging made my mind waver, but not in the way she intended. Instead, a nameless fury surged through me, not just toward Naomi, but more so toward Jack. And right at that moment, Jack arrived. He got out of the car and strode over, his expression cold as he yanked Naomi up from the ground. "What the hell are you doing here?" he snapped. Tears streamed down Naomi's face. "Jack, I'm begging you, let me keep this baby." Jack's gaze flickered in panic as he turned to me. "Emmy." I finally pulled away from the chaos, but my thoughts were still entangled in it. I took a deep breath and met Jack's eyes with a frosty stare. "You're a mess. Your responsibility. Grandma is still sleeping. Don't wake her up." Jack paled. Naomi was still sobbing, her cries grating on my ears. The pressure built in my skull. I felt like my head was about to explode. Jack's expression darkened. His grip on Naomi's arm tightened. "I already told you, I'll give you financial compensation. Why are you coming after my family? But this is your child." I won't acknowledge it. The ice in his voice sent a shiver down Naomi's spine. Jack's gaze turned sharp. Don't push me. Naomi's entire body went rigid, her face blank with disbelief. And in that moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Naomi's resentment burned as she glared at both of us. And then, a voice cut through the tension behind us. What's all this noise? Jack and I spun around at the same time. Grandma. Her frail figure stood at the doorway, watching us in confusion. Suddenly, before either of us could react, a shadow darted past Jack and me. With a loud thud, Naomi dropped to her knees in front of Grandma. Grandma, I'm pregnant. The baby is Jack's. Silence. Then, what do you mean, Jack's? I already have a granddaughter-in-law. They're getting divorced. Jack cheated. I am his true love. The moment those words left Naomi's lips, Grandma's entire body trembled. She slowly turned her gaze toward Jack and me. Then, all at once, her face went pale. Her entire frame shook violently. And before we could do anything, she collapsed. Grandma, Grandma. Chapter 14. The wail of ambulance sirens sliced through the night. The light above the emergency room never flickered off. Jack sat slumped on the hospital bench, his expression vacant. The moment his mother arrived, she didn't even say a word before slapping him hard across the face. You disgrace! How did I raise such a heartless son? Jack said nothing. His mother turned to me, as if she had something to say, but hesitated. In the end, she simply asked, "How is she?" Still under observation. Silence settled between us again. Half an hour later, the doctor emerged from the emergency room. The patient is awake. Family members can visit, but keep it brief. Thank goodness. Jack and his mother rushed inside. I followed behind them and saw Grandma Lee lying weakly on the hospital bed. At the sound of our footsteps, she opened her eyes. Her gaze skipped past Jack and his mother, and landed directly on me. Emily, come here. Child. She lifted her frail hand and gestured for me to come closer. I hesitated, unsure of what to say, but when I saw the cloudy yet kind warmth in her eyes, I finally gathered the courage to step forward and take her hand. Grandma, despite everything, she was uncharacteristically lucid at this moment. Her gaze was gentle, filled with love and regret. My dear child, how could you bear such a grievance without saying a word? I shook my head, my eyes stinging as tears fell. Guilt washed over me. Maybe I should have told her the truth long ago. Maybe then she wouldn't have had to suffer such a shock. It's not your fault. It's Jack who has wronged you. At the mention of his name, Jack's body stiffened. He took a step forward and knelt by the bedside. I'm sorry, Grandma. This is all my fault. Grandma looked at him with disappointment and sadness. We didn't want to tire her out, so we soon left the room. Jack's mother wore a dark expression. Clean up your mess first. And for now, don't show your face around Grandma. Oh, right. I had almost forgotten about Naomi. As the one directly responsible for Grandma's hospitalization, Naomi had completely run out of Jack's patience. Jack left in frustration. Once he was gone, his mother turned to me. She opened her mouth, hesitated, then closed it again. After a long pause, she sighed and said, "Go home and get some rest." In the following days, I didn't see Jack or Naomi, but through mutual friends, I learned what had happened. After Grandma was hospitalized, Naomi had gone into hiding, terrified of Jack's retaliation. She didn't dare show her face, but he still found her. She was so terrified she ended up miscarrying. When Jack found her, she was too scared to even go to the hospital. That was the update I received from a friend. I didn't know how to feel. Maybe just a faint sigh of inevitability. 3 days later, Grandma's condition improved. I visited her at the hospital and unexpectedly ran into Jack. We tacitly avoided mentioning that day's events, and we didn't speak of the divorce. But then, Grandma suddenly asked, "Emily, you and Jack, are you getting a divorce?" Chapter 15. Jack and I were both stunned. I didn't want to deceive her any longer, so I nodded. Yes. Beside me, Jack's body trembled slightly, revealing a rare moment of vulnerability. I had thought Grandma Lee would try to mediate and smooth things over, but instead, she simply let out a long sigh. All right, Grandma respects your decision. Back then, I was the one who brought you two together. Now that you're separating, I won't say much. She took my hand, her voice dry and hoarse. Emily, you will always be a child that Grandma loves. My eyes felt dry, my throat too tight to speak. After the old lady fell asleep, Jack and I left the hospital room. At this point, there was no need for us to keep up appearances. Sign the divorce papers. Jack's eyes suddenly turned red. Emmy, can we not get divorced? He rested his head on my shoulder, his arms wrapped around me so tightly, as if trying to fuse me into his bones. His voice was hoarse and full of despair. I was wrong. I love you. Can we start over? When I loved Jack, I longed to hear those words from him, but now that he had finally said what I once wished to hear, I felt nothing. When I liked him, he loved his first love. When he married me, I thought he had chosen me too, but the shadow of his first love's death loomed between us, widening the rift. As time passed, he fell for someone who was merely a substitute for his first love. For 3 years, we maintained a courteous but distant relationship, married in name only. And now, it had come to a bleak end. I remained silent. Jack understood my resolve. Warm tears fell onto my neck. At last, Jack signed the divorce papers. He transferred 80% of his assets to me. I've wronged you. No amount of compensation would be too much. Grandma Lee soon learned about our divorce. She closed her eyes, full of regret and sorrow. The day we signed the divorce papers happened to be our 3rd wedding anniversary. The restaurant called to confirm with Jack. Sir, do you need any additional arrangements for your reserved private room? No need. Cancel it, he said. Huh? Lowering his gaze, Jack softly replied. My wife and I have divorced. It's no longer needed. There was a long silence on the other end before they awkwardly ended the call. Later, Jack asked me, Emmy, can we still be friends? I frowned. Better not. It would be best if we never saw each other again. And indeed, for many years, we never did. The only exception was 6 months later at Grandma Lee's funeral. I gathered the divorce papers, picked up my bag, and walked away. Halfway through, Joel called me. Got time? Let's grab a meal. Sure, I'll come pick you up. Stepping out from the shadows, I walked into the sunlight. The breeze brushed against my face. The sky was clear. Everything was a new beginning.